maybe it's my personal things, but I would love to welcome everyone in a meeting and apologize for thinking that it's Tuesday today. I sometimes travel on Mondays to Cape Town, and yesterday I traveled yesterday, and in my thinking it's as if it's Monday and it's Tuesday today, until I was reminded by Lindy and Tandy. Thanks ever so much. The meeting is officially opened without wasting time, because we have to get ready for the bus and go for the medium-term review. We have high expectations on this medium-term budget, as we know that we have to deliver.
Recording in progress.
And people are looking forward to us, and they have expectations from us. So we wish all the best for us and for the world at large. The meeting, as I have said, it's officially opened. Lindy, will you please confirm whether we do correct for us to continue with the meeting? Or
thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, members. The Minister in our presence, my colleagues from the department and from Parliament. Today is the 26th of October 2022. There's a meeting, official meeting of Parliament, the National Assembly. Chair, I would like to confirm the following members of the Portfolio Committee on Social Development who are in attendance of this meeting. You, Member Vanna, as the chairperson of this meeting. I have Member Masango, I have Member Abrahams, I have Member Stock, I have Member Mfikwe, I have Member Mare, I have Member Eris, I have Member Pelangulu, I have Member Vanda Merve, I have Member Opperman, I have Member Manganyi, I have Member Shongo Chair. It's safe to say that we are a quorum, we are operating, and we can take decisions of this meeting as the rules of Parliament, of the National Assembly requires us to do so. Thank you very much, Chair.
thank you, Ms. Sabo. I can say that the officials have joined us, because we are quite a number that is expected. But let's also request you, Lindy, to flight the agenda so as to give us the apologies. And as I have already said, I wish to welcome everybody in a meeting. I just want to acknowledge the presence of the Minister and the Deputy Minister if they are present in the meeting. Thank you, Lindy. You can see the agenda. The agenda, honorable members, it's as that. But before we adopt it, let's request Lindy to do the apologies and also the acting DG. Who is saying chairperson? I heard a voice saying chairperson. Lindy, over to you. Apologies. Lindy, wait.
Sorry, Chair. I didn't see that. Sorry, apologies. I didn't see that I'm muted. We have only one apology, Chair, from Member Vanda Merve, who is with us now. She requested an early departure. She is en route to the airport. She would like to depart, to leave the meeting at 10:30. So that's the only apology I've received, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lindy. I assume that the apology has been accepted But let's also give over to the DG in terms of telling us who's in the meeting, whether are they co-rating or relevant people have attended, but if the minister is here, let's also, after this adoption of the agenda, and give her an opportunity to give us a political overview. Acting DG, apologies from your side.
Very good morning, Honorable Chair, and good morning to honorable members. Good morning to the Minister and Deputy Minister and all colleagues. The DSD is here, and there are no apologies from our side. We're here in full force. The only apology would be for the CEO of SASSA, who is out of town at the moment. But the entire team is here, including as led by our Minister. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Acting DG. Well, then let's go to the next item, which is the adoption of the agenda. The only item in the agenda is the briefing by the department on the Older Persons Amendment Bill. And then we have the deliberation.
I'm gonna be speaking now, guys. So if you can not speak in the music off.
Minister, you are unmuted.
Who is that now? Who wants to speak now?
No, my apology, Chair. I was trying to get quiet in my place where I am.
Okay.
My apology. Yes.
Adoption, okay, sure, Minister. Adoption of the agenda, honorable members, is presented. It needs to be a short meeting so as to be able to get ready for the plenary. Honorable Mhlongo.
Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings to members and the department. I move for the adoption of the agenda as presented.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Mhlongo. Honorable Bridget Masango.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to.
You are breaking, Honorable Masango. What are you saying? We can't hear you, Masango. Honorable Masango, your network is poor.
To second Ms. Honorable Mhlongo in adopting the agenda.
Thank you very much.
Chair. I just Honorable Mhlongo in adopting the agenda. Hear me now?
Yes, we are able to hear you. Thank you very much for seconding, Honorable Mhlongo.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you very much, Honorable Masango. Okay. Can we then give over to the minister? The minister has been longing to speak to us long ago. So let's give her an opportunity. Minister, noting that Eastern Cape has launched the Orange Day, no violence against women and children yesterday. We hope that at least you have noted that, and you also say something about that GBV tendency that we are experiencing in our world. Let's give over to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. If I could also just keep my video off because the network is very poor. Firstly, let me thank you, Honorable Nonkosi Mvana, for giving me this opportunity, but also to say to your comments earlier on, that you are not fine. Many of us wake up sometimes not fine, so you're not alone. I hope that in the day your spirits will be lifted, and the honorable members who are here will also help you lift your spirit. Honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, as usual, I wish to thank you for giving us this opportunity. The Deputy Minister, I'm not sure if the Deputy Minister is here. I didn't hear an apology from her side. I take it that she is here. And of course, the acting DG, the executive of NDA, because I'm aware that the SASSA NDA is out of the country, senior managers and officials of the Department of Social Development and entities who are present here. I wish to say good morning to everyone. Cape Town, we are in Cape Town and the weather is beautiful. It's sunny. But I am also starting not from a positive note, hearing what Honorable Member Mvana was speaking about, the issue of gender-based violence and femicide. We thank those provinces that, not only just the provinces actually, we should be able to thank all community members, all leaders of different communities who are really stepping up, men and women, and in particular the men who are stepping up to say not in their name, who are working around the clock to help us end gender-based violence. And I'd also like to say, Chair, in the department, I've been saying at any platform where I am, I'm saying one of the ways that we can be able to deal with this is for us to really get to the ground, deal with gender-based violence, house to house, street to street, community to community, so that it is the communities that own the fight. It's the communities that carry on the fight. It is the communities that see the tendencies and begin to deal with those tendencies long before we have to go and cry besides graves of women and children that are killed, but before we even have a situation where women and children have to be running away from their own homes and their own communities. If we take it to that level, down at that level, I'm sure we will defeat it. Rather than thinking we're going to pass legislation, have activities that only go in at a time because we are going to the 16 days of activism. When we say it's 360 60 days, we really mean it, and we must act that way. Thank you. As we will be drawing the social development, as we'll be drawing towards the end of the social development month, as we bring it to a close in a few days, I remind us that when we launched the commemoration of this national month at the beginning of October, we joined the global community in honoring the life, achievements, and resilience of our older persons. The Kenyan proverb, and I quote it, "An elder is a healer," I close quote, challenges our communities and society as a whole to protect our older persons and improve their resilience, because it is from integrating their knowledge base into our present day creation that we will be better able to attend to the incidences of loss, violence, trauma, mental health, hunger, and malnutrition, and multiple others that we experience. Consisting approximately of 9.2% of the population, the number of South Africa's older person is growing rapidly as life expectancy is improving. While the average older person was aged 61.7 years in 2021, today, 2022, he or she is 62.8 years old. To be particular, among older persons, the average age for men is 62.5 years, whereas women's average age is 68.5 years. Noting these social and demographic imperatives, our society agreed that we need to enact legislation by which we could ensure that One, the various mandates of government provide older persons with quality services. Two, the demographic population ought to be afforded the necessary protection by each and every one of us. And three, that they must be provided with the best possible care through community-based and residential care facilities. Chairperson, I do want to indicate here that we must not forget the fact that the majority of our people who are old now, as according to the description, many of them never had the opportunity of preparing for their time when they retire and when they are older, and they can be able to first take care of themselves because they had put a nest away for this time. Many of them never had the opportunity to do so. Many of them were, even those who are getting their social grant, are still carrying the burden of ensuring that they take care of the children, they take care of the grandchildren. Even so, the money that they receive is money that usually ends up being spent on the family, on the families, rather than them enjoying that bit of money that they get. So, Chairperson, besides the need to effect the crucial definition, textual clarity, and legislative alignment across the entire system, the bill seeks to, one, simplify the removal of older persons to temporary safe care facilities where such a need arises, ensure the tightening of the existing implementation and compliance measures, ensure that our society provides older persons with quality services and valuable protection, strengthen the monitoring and evaluation. Sorry, Chairperson, I'm using my phone and I get calls at the same time. Strengthen the monitoring and evaluation measure of the services that older persons receive, inclusive of proper enforcement measures for non-compliance, and strengthen Chapter 5 of the protection of the older person with the introduction of strict measures and penalties to enhance the dignity of older person. The strengthening of provision of Chapter 5 will promote the rights of older persons as much as it will ensure that their protection from acts of violence being violated and abuse. The details that are relevant to these amendments from the briefing that this honorable committee is about to receive. And I'm hoping also that in this context where I've just tried to pick up a few issues related to the context, the acting DG and the team will further strengthen the contextual background of why we are here, and also what are we trying to solve, including the fact that, of course, we have a responsibility as the Department of Social Development. But I want, in conclusion on my side, to also indicate that taking care of the elderly must not, and it should not always be seen to be that responsibility of the Department of Social Development alone. All other departments have a role to play in this, because infrastructure is important for them. Hospitals, clinics, homes and proper homes are also very important. And those are not issues and health, those are not issues that are dealt with by the department. We need to pull on all the other departments to help us in ensuring that the implementation thereof and the creation of a conducive environment for the elderly is what we have to do as far as we are government in coordinating with others. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for reminding us that we are about to close the month of the elderly, but it doesn't mean that it's totally closure. It means that just for commemorating it, it needs to be commemorated for 365 days. But for now, we are just closing it temporarily. Thanks ever so much, Minister. And also reminding us about the coming of the 16 days of activism, which will definitely end. which will get high GBV cases, and we have to guard against that and work very hard with our stakeholders and also communities in terms of stopping this scourge that is very funny to us lately. Thanks. Wonderful, Minister. And also we would love to encourage you for this dedication that you are having given by God and respect to us to attend the meetings of the Portfolio Committee, Minister. Thank you ever so much, and the Deputy Minister in her absence. Let's proceed. Thanks. Let's proceed.
Chairperson, sorry, Letitia speaking. Morning, Chair. Chair, I'm a bit confused. I just need a clarity. Why is this bill in front of us? Is this bill not supposed to be in committee of the presidency? Why is older people now in front of social development? Then social development, they have so much aspects, social ills that this department cannot even address. Why is it that this bill is now in front of us? And I've also noted that this bill is coming a long way. It's long overdue. I was looking at the date of the bill, so I just need clarity on that before we start with this.
Okay, thank you for that question, Honorable Aris. Let's again give the Minister, because she's still in the platform, and assist on this, knowing exactly that it's coming for a long way, and we know that this is an amendment. It's not the bill per se, but let's hear from the Minister. I'm not going to answer for them.
Thank you, Chairperson. The department is about to make its presentation, and part of the presentation will be covering exactly that.
No, I refer specifically, sorry, Chair, Minister, I specifically refer to the portfolio of social development. Why is it not in the portfolio of the presidency? That's what I'm asking.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say, that the department, when it makes its presentation, it's going to cover all those aspects. I was just pleading that we give the department an opportunity to make the presentation, and that's when all the things that the honorable member is asking will be clarified.
Turn right, then arrive at your destination.
Thank you very much, Minister. Let's hear the department. What is it that they are going to say when they present in terms of the question that has been asked? Thank you ever so much. Can we give over straight to the department?
Chair,
Yes.
Before that, I wish to, I don't know whether Mr. Stock wants to speak. Mr. Stock hand was up. I also want to inform the committee that the Deputy Minister's office submitted an apology at 9:45, indicating that she's in Mpumalanga, Mawewe, in a project, but she's unable to connect because there's no network where she is. So that's the apology. Also, Chair, Member Sukas joined the meeting. She's part of this meeting. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Lindy. I was about to give the department to present. Okay, I still see the hand of Honorable Stock.
No, thank you very much. No, thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I was adequately covered by the Minister and yourself that we must allow the department to deal with the presentation, and then some of the questions that we have, we'll be able to pose them once the department is presented. Because if we're going to ask questions now, we'll be preempting, like putting the cart before the horse. So let's allow the department, Honorable Chairperson. That's all what I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, Honorable Stock, thank you very much. Let's give over to the department. I don't know who's Zoom user, but
Member Mangani.
Oh, okay. Can she be assisted to name her gadget? But for now, let's give Honorable Mangani. Oh, the hand has been vanished. Okay.
let's give over to the department to present, and then also maybe touch the question that has been asked in terms of their presentation. Over to you, department.
Well, thank you very much, Honorable Chair and honorable members, for the opportunity to present this very important piece of legislation. Let me start by just indicating a few things. One, perhaps to respond to the comment by Honorable Aris. The older persons legislation is a piece of legislation that is the core responsibility of the Department of Social Development, and we are the custodians of the policy and all matters relating to older persons insofar as the policy aspect is concerned. And indeed, we work with a range of government departments, but in essence, the department has always been the custodian of older persons policy. What the member may be, I suppose, referring to, but I'll be guided, is the aspect as it relates to persons with disabilities. That is the prime responsibility and the custodian of that particular piece of legislation is the Minister for Women, Youth and Persons with Disability. The presidency, however, we do have a very crucial role and part that we play in the certain aspects as it relates to that piece of legislation. Likewise, we are the custodian of the Older Persons Act. However, other government departments have a role to play as well, insofar as the implementation of a number of aspects. But when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, etc., and anything to do with the piece of legislation that falls squarely within the Department of Social Development, it's always been the case since the Act was first brought into being in 2006. If my memory serves me correct. But it's always been in the hands of the Department of Social Development, given the role that we play and I suppose our mandate as well. I hope that answers the honourable member. Now, if we could go to the presentation, can we put the presentation on the screen? Maybe let me make the request to the Secretariat to allow the presentation, to allow Luyanda to share the screen on his side. And if you can put it up. As he puts it up, let me just maybe add one or two very important points, taking from the first question that was raised. Part of what we have a responsibility to do as the Department of Social Development within the context of the state is to ensure the well-being, the safety and security of older persons. And we do this through legislation, through the various legislative frameworks, be it the bills, be it the policies that we put out for implementation of various aspects of the bills or the regulations, and be it the norms and standards that we will put out. And of course, we provide monitoring through this. And part of what we want to do with the amendments of this bill, if you have to ask a question, what are we solving for? What are we trying to address through the amendments of this particular bill? I will give you a few aspects which will come out some may come out in the presentation, but at a summary level or at a high level, I think it's important that we just highlight this. Firstly, we do want to strengthen the aspect of monitoring. I think that maybe before I get to the aspect of monitoring, part of what we want to do through these amendments is to redefine some of the definitions, as it were, and definitions of older persons care, caregiver, manager, person, rehabilitation, and so on, including residential facilities. We want to redefine some of those, including bringing in new definitions that we believe are very important to be addressed in the Act, given the fact that the current dispensation which we're in, we want to bring more meaning to some of these aspects. So it's part of dealing with the definitions. Part of also what we want to do as part of the definitions, I suppose, is to address the age categorization to bring about equalization, as it were, to align, for example, to other acts like the Social Assistance Act, which deals with the grants system. You note that before the age of defining older persons used to be different depending on gender. So for males, you would have to be 65 to be called an older person. For females, you have to be 60 to be called an older person. We're trying to bring about a standardization on some of those aspects, which I think is an important aspect. So part of what we're also trying to do is to ensure or to strengthen the provisions of monitoring and evaluation by putting much more stringent conditions or monitoring measures in place. I think this is important for a number of reasons. Firstly, to enhance the reporting tools that we have, which we want to put forward. And in some cases, these may be digital tools or automated tools. We want to enhance the monitoring aspects, especially at a local level, and make sure that the services that also be provided to older persons are indeed being provided from the lowest level, or rather from communities at local level through to districts and so on. So we must be able to strengthen our monitoring aspects in that regard, but also to enhance an understanding of the rationale of the initiatives that we put forward in terms of the various programs that we would have, but also just understanding the act in itself. So we also want to make sure that we're providing. We want to just make sure that we're providing a quality service and we're getting value for money, as it were, through the support that we're providing to the Act. Let me just also indicate that part of what we do as an organization is to ensure or to promote, as I indicated, the well-being, yes, the safety and security, but also to promote healthy lifestyles from a very early age. We are an aging population as a country. We have a lot of older persons. We have a huge number of older persons, and we expect that older persons will take a longer time to die as time goes along. Of course, we have a very aging population. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that from an early age we inculcate this aspect of healthy living. This is why we have active aging programs from older persons. So again, this is really trying to deal with within the context of the department, sort of cradle to grave approach. The department intervenes from the birth of a child, even prior to the birth of a child, all the way to the death of a child, and we have the responsibility of intervening at various stages through this cycle, this life cycle, as it were, from cradle to grave. So we're encouraging younger people to take care of their health as it is right now, so that when they get to when they get older, as it were, the measures that we put in place are simplistic. They flow in a much easier way, but also they have prepared themselves to get a lot. To get to the age that at least the older person's ages, or the age rather. What we also want to do, Chair, is we want to address some of the institutional arrangements, which talk to collaboration and strengthening cooperation, particularly at provincial levels, at government to government level. For example, we want to elevate a number of issues to previous offices that relate to older persons, because at the moment a lot of responsibility is borne by the Department of Social Development, but we want to make sure that government across the board is able to respond and report to issues of older persons. So we think that in provinces, premiers will have a more prominent role to play as it relates to these matters, but also from a budgetary perspective, we must make sure that adequate budget is provided, not just by social development, but other government departments as well. Of course, it's also strengthening collaboration with all sectors of society, including civil society. Let me just give you an example of one of the things that we managed to do in some provinces in Limpopo a number of years ago, and maybe this is Limpopo, Eastern Cape, probably KZN as well, but we found this more in Limpopo, that 2010, 2011, 2012, and so on, a lot of cases of older persons were being reported as being killed. We had a high number of cases of older persons being killed, but that was because of suspicion of some of the big witches. But it was actually because of Alzheimer's and dementia, which are medical conditions which were not really understood by communities, at least at the time. And so Limpopo, for example, initiated partnerships with civil society organizations. I can't remember the one in particular that they utilized, and we funded this the civil society organization to bring about information, advocacy, and to guide members of society around the importance of medical conditions or diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia. And we've since seen a reduction in the number of cases of older persons being killed in that province and 1 or 2 other provinces because of such interventions. What we're also doing with these amendments is to strengthen the advocacy aspects, particularly as it relates to providing greater support to older persons forums, which, by the way, have become very active over time. In every province, there exist older persons forums, and we engage actively with them and work with them as an important stakeholder to ensure that we bring about the support mechanisms to older persons. But that said, as well, I mean, we continue to fund NGOs across the spectrum, and those who also assist in terms of intervening in cases of emergencies. For example, we have an initiative called Safe Beds. We want to avoid older persons being on the street. So through this initiative of Safe Beds, which is doing very well actually in Gauteng at the moment, we are able to take older persons into safe spaces and avoid them being on the streets and them being homeless as well. So we have these initiatives as a department. Of course, we do a number of other issues such as trainings and advocacy, etc. So those are some of the important things. We also want to, just through the amendments, Chair, enhance the process of registration of residential facilities and community-based care and support services. We want to enhance the registration processes, make it more simplistic, so that we don't have the current challenges that we face. In addition, maybe just lastly, we do want to reinforce the measures around strengthening protection measures. For example, we want to make sure that we make it easier to remove older persons from facilities. Currently, we need a court order to do that, and we're trying to simplify it because in the waiting process of trying to get a court order, older persons could die or something may happen. So we're trying to find the most simplistic way of doing that and to avoid waiting periods and so on. But also what we are pushing for through this legislation and in consultation with other departments, also the Department of Justice and Correctional Services, Justice in the main, is to have much more stringent penalties for persons who abuse older persons. We think that this is important. We must send a clear message out there that the abuse of older persons, we don't tolerate that. We want to make sure that we deal with that. The might of the law must be able to address that in a very stern way. And so we want to send that message across through this, but also other issues like independence in assisted living approaches. We want to enhance those in residential facilities and bring them into the law so that they're standardized across the spectrum. Chair, let me not go into too much of the detail. I thought let me just point some of these things to you, which I believe are very important aspects as we start the presentation. It provides a contextual overview of what we are trying to solve for as an organization through the amendments of this bill. So I'll now ask Leander to go into the detail of the presentation, and then I will come in at the later stage. My colleagues, Isabella and Sybil, are also here, who will also talk to some aspects towards the end. Thank you very much, Chair. At the end of that, let me ask Leander to go straight into the presentation. I've provided some background, so you want to go through it as quickly as possible. Thank you very much. Leander?
Through you, Chair. Good morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable members, colleagues, the department and in the Parliament. Let me just switch on the video. It's been a long time we've been together. Let me switch it off again. I will not go much into detail with regards to the purpose and the background, as the Minister and the DG have spoken to that. I will just go straight into the purpose of the provisions that are being amended, starting from that is another, the next page, please. The next page, where we begin with the definitions.
Chairperson, there's an echo, we can't hear, or there's somebody who's speaking.
I think there was somebody speaking behind the presenter, so can we request him to try and avoid that?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. With regard to the presentation, the issue about this particular bill is that it seeks to amend the Older Persons Act, that is Act number 13 of 2006, in order to insert new definitions and provisions relating to the monitoring and evaluation of all social services rendered to older persons, as has been indicated that there has been a vacuum in this particular area, and there have been challenges in the old age homes and in the space of older persons in the country. It further seeks to insert new measures for the removal of an older person to a temporary safe care, that is safe care facility without a court order, because this has been a challenge in the past with regard to the issue of approaching the High Court, which is very expensive and time consuming, and that seeks to be removed in terms of this particular bill, so as to make that approach being accessible. It also intends to respond to identified legislative gaps on the Principal Act, as has been presented by the Minister and the DG. I don't want to go back to that, as they have exhausted the topic. And it also looks at ensuring the issue of coordination, because this is an intersectoral issue, and there has been poor coordination with regard to how the provision of services have to ensue in this regard. It also seeks to strengthen the monitoring and evaluation measures on services to older persons, inclusive of proper enforcement measures for non-compliance. That is an imposition of the regulated penalties that is being proposed in this. It also seeks to strengthen Chapter 5 on the protection of older persons with the introduction of strict measures and penalties, as has been indicated. The next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, with regards to the definitions, I can just go through because someone is moving the slides. My apologies for that, Honorable Chair. With regard to the issue of the definitions that this particular bill seeks to deal with in order to deal with the gaps that have been identified. So the first definition that it looks at is to align the definition of an older person with regard to females and males, which was actually based on the Social Assistance Act, where the males would be older persons at 65 and the females older persons at 60. So the new proposals in terms of this is to redefine the older person so as to bridge the gap that is created by the current legislation, which is contrary to Section 9 of the Constitution, which intends not to have any unfair discrimination based on the issues of gender. So the envisaged impact in terms of this is to ensure that all older persons will receive services without this discrimination, that is in terms of the age of 60 and 65. Again, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, still on the definitions, there were certain critical definitions that were missing in the current legislation, such as the definition of a stakeholder assisted living facility, independent living facility, frail care facility, interdepartmental structure, palliative care, private residential facility, and temporary safe care. So all these definitions are being introduced in the bill so as to ensure effective service delivery. And this will ensure at the end of the day that no services are being misdirected. Again, with regard to the second part, which is still in Chapter 1, the general principles that are being amended. So in terms of the general principles, these did not include the traditional practices affecting older persons. you will notice that we have, we are actually part of the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and also on the rights of older persons in Africa. And in terms of Article 8 of that protocol, it is important to understand that there is a need to eliminate harmful traditional practices, including witchcraft accusations, which affect the welfare, health, life, and dignity of older persons. So this is the challenge that we are facing at present, and we need to align this particular legislation with that protocol, so that at the end of the day, older persons will live with dignity and will be protected against these accusations. With regard to the amendment to Section 7, that is in terms of the rights of older persons, this section focuses on the rights of older persons. In terms of the current scenario, there were no responsibilities that were outlined for older persons, yet older persons have a wealth of knowledge and wisdom which can be utilized and are regarded as pillars of families. So the intention in terms of this particular bill is to insert Section 7 capital A on the responsibilities of older persons. This will be in line with Article 20, that is protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as I've indicated earlier, so as to ensure that people, that is older people, are used as by younger generations as sources of wisdom, and also used as pillars of community with regard to such issues. Again, with regard to Section 7 amendment in Chapter 2, this section focused on the rights of older persons, but there were some gaps, as I have indicated, and certain rights of older persons were also infringed, as I've also indicated earlier. So there is an insertion of Section 7 capital B on the protection of the older person's rights to property, inheritance, and physical abuse. This is also in line with Article 9 of the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of older persons in Africa. The whole intention for the provision and the envisaged impact is that older persons' rights to property and inheritance will be protected, and will be protected against physical abuse. That is the older persons themselves and the property itself. Because you will notice that sometimes when there are challenges and even with accusations of witchcraft, the people's homes get burnt into ashes, and the people themselves get burnt into ashes. So this bill seeks to protect that from happening. With regard to Section 11(2)(c) amendment, that is the gaps that were identified were around the issues of programs, and older persons were not capacitated on non-communicable chronic diseases, as an example. So Section 12, that is 11(2)(c), was revised to include information on non-communicable chronic diseases. So older persons will receive comprehensive information on matters affecting them with regard to that amendment. Again, with regard to Section 13, that is the proposed amendment around the issues of registration of community-based care and support services. So this section allows for the individuals to register to provide community-based services to the older persons. So the intention here is to ensure that individuals using older persons for income generating purposes are barred from doing such. That and in that must be controlled in terms of the envisaged amendment. So there is an insertion of Section Clause 1 capital A into Section 13 to allow only juristic persons or a trust to register for provision of these community-based services, not individuals, as a gap has been identified in that particular area. It is actually not saying that the juristic persons themselves do not have that ability. of misusing funds that are meant to service the older persons for their own personal gain. But at least that risk is minimized if juristic persons are involved. So at the end of the day, the community-based services will be properly regulated, and this will assist in avoiding haphazard closure where older persons are left stranded without alternatives. Again, with regard to section 13, subsection 2, in chapter 3, where there is also the need to amend this so as to deal with the duration of registration. The issue here is that there was a challenge with regard to the duration of registration, and then the registration certificates do not actually have the expiry date in terms of the current scenario. As a result, it becomes difficult to monitor these at the end of the day. So once the issue of the expiry date is addressed, then the challenges will be much less. Again, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, the amendment around section 13.4, which is registration of community-based services again. So this section only made provisions for service providers to terminate community-based services to older persons in case they have valid reasons. So the department could terminate these services in case of valid reasons. There was a gap in terms of what constitutes those valid reasons. There have been challenges from time to time. And now this is being revised to make provision for the department to terminate these with reasons properly provided in order to justify the closure thereof. So these will be properly regulated, and the department will not be litigated for termination of services in case there is, in cases where there is a valid reason, because some of these homes are not properly run, and when you want to close them down, they run to court, and the courts will always rule in their favor to say the department may have failed to provide sufficient reasons because of the nature of how these provisions are crafted at present. So this bill seeks to address that shortcoming. Again, in section 14, which is also an amendment that is being envisaged, that is provision of community-based care. So this section only included training of caregivers providing home-based care. So now the training of caregivers to people providing frail care services was not included, and this bill seeks to close that gap, and all caregivers in both community-based setup and residential facilities will undergo the same training to ensure protection of older persons. So this bill will be addressing that. Again, in section 14.3, where there is also another amendment, this section currently includes keeping of register of caregivers providing home-based care services only. So the keeping of this register of caregivers, that is of the caregivers with regard to frail care services, was not included. So the proposal seeks to include the issue of frail care services that must be included. So at the end of the day, a register of all caregivers in both community-based services and residential facilities will be kept to ensure protection of older persons. With regard to the amendment to section 15, which is about monitoring and evaluation of community-based services, the challenge is that there were gaps in terms of monitoring and evaluation of services, as has been indicated by the minister and the DG when they with their opening remarks. And the challenge with this was that the community-based services in residential facilities were not properly monitored. So the amendment seeks to strengthen to ensure the prescription of monitoring and evaluation to enforce compliance. Because if this is not done, there will always be challenges in these homes, and at the end of the day, the department may be litigated and the state under general may be put into bad light in terms of it having failed to protect the elderly in the country. So the prescribed provisions will then tighten compliance measures and monitoring and evaluation systems. Again, with regard to Section 17, which is also one of the provisions that's being amended in the principal legislation, this particular section only included frail care services as well as read together with the previous provision that I've referred to earlier. The challenge is that independent living and assisted living services were not included, although they were included in the norms and standards. So there was a misalignment between the norms and standards and also the legislation itself, that is the Principal Act. So the proposed amendment seeks to insert paragraph K and L to include provision of independent living services and assisted living services. And the impact that is envisaged is that all these categories of residential care services will be regulated at the end of the day. So the purpose is just to ensure that everything is done according to the book, and the Act is so exhaustive in terms of dealing with all issues of monitoring and compliance at the end of the day. Again, with regards to Section 18, which relates to the prohibition on operation of unregistered residential facilities and registration of such other facilities that relate to older persons. So this particular section did not include private residential facilities, assisted living, or similar facilities. So the rationale for the amendment of this particular provision is to include the registration of private facilities, assisted living, and similar facilities, so as to close the gap that exists at the amended present because of such a shortcoming. So the prescribed provisions will then tighten compliance measures and monitoring and evaluation systems. Again, with still on Section 18 amendment, as this section only allows individuals to register to provide residential facilities. So individuals were then using older persons for income generating purposes, as I indicated in the summary I gave earlier, that the juristic persons need to be brought on board in this regard, so that at the end of the day, the risk is being minimized. We have seen what has happened previously with regard to Life Esidimeni around this issue, where individuals were owning the facilities for the mentally ill, and they were not provided food and such other things that happened there. So it's a lesson that has been learned from such scenarios, which has yielded such bad results at the end of the day. So at the impact will, that is the residential facilities will be properly regulated, and this will assist in avoiding haphazard closure as the scenario that I had indicated earlier, so that at the end of the day, if there is a need for a closure, there must be an alternative as to how do we deal with those who will be accommodated in that particular facility. So such arrangements need to be taken into account. Again, still in Section 18, there were also gaps in terms of the deregistration, closing and revocation of registration, which is always a challenge with regard to these kinds of provisions, where the provision is made for the registration of a facility, but a counter provision is not provided for in terms of when one wants to close that. So it's more of an administrative provision that seeks to ensure that mushrooming of unregistered facilities are prohibited. So there is an inclusion of Section 18 capital A to include deregistration, closing, and revocation of registration of residential facilities as proposed in this legislation. And the intention at the end of the day is to ensure that unregistered facilities are closed in order to protect the elderly. There is also the amendment of Section 25 in terms of the current legislation being the Principal Act, where there were gaps in terms of older persons in need of care and protection. Because just like children, I mean, and the issue of vulnerability of the older persons, at times there are also people who are in need of care and protection as per the challenges that they face as older persons. So the older persons in a way are vulnerable as we speak. So the new proposal in terms of this bill is to revise this Section 25 in order to insert subsection 5, which will include a person who has been or being maltreated, abused, neglected, or degraded by a caregiver or family member, or a person who has been accused of practicing witchcraft or blamed by the community for inexplicable events. So the impact that is envisaged is that all categories of older persons in need of care and protection will be protected, because we understand that it's common cause, honorable members and honorable chair, that when you deal with issues of older persons, they are always such accusation of witchcraft, which we need to suppress from time to time by making sure that this legislation is implemented successfully for the sake of having peace and harmony in communities. Still on Section 25 being amended, there were no provisions for removal of older persons to temporary safe care. So what this bill seeks to do is seeks to insert Section 25 capital A to include the removal of older persons to temporary safe care without a court order, because the challenge has been that if one needs to remove a person under those circumstances, it is time consuming, expensive, and very much involved in terms of the process, because that is the nature of a transaction that is involved when one wants to approach a high court. So now this provision is talking about the scenario where there is a need if there is a need to remove an older person to safety, there is no need for a court order. So older persons will have an alternative place to go in case of abuse, instead of being subjected to abuse for a long time simply because we are waiting for a court order or a court to make a pronouncement on whether the person is really in need of care and protection under the circumstances. Still on Section 25, the older persons in need of care and protection, as been indicated, that is, there were no provisions for older persons with regard to people with disabilities and with chronic illnesses. The understanding was just that it was looking at a normal case scenario, but not looking at the issue of people with disabilities and chronic illnesses. There was no specific service outlined for older persons with disability and chronic illness in terms of the current scenario, that is in terms of the Principal Act. So this bill seeks to insert Section 25B into the Principal Act in order to include services to older persons with disability or with chronic illness. It is in line actually with Article 13 of the Protocol to the African Charter on Human Rights that I alluded to earlier, in a way to domesticate that particular charter as contemplated in terms of Section 231 of the Constitution. And the impact that we need to see at the end of the day is that older persons with disability and chronic illnesses will receive the appropriate services that they deserve. Again, the amendment to Section 26, that is notification of abuse of older persons. There was no time frame in terms of investigation of elder person in terms in terms of the current legislation. So the case of elderly abuse was left unattended, and there is currently no accountability on practitioners. So Section 26 will now be revised in order to include social workers, police officials, and managers investigating elderly abuse cases, and a time frame of 48 hours to investigate reported, in fact, minimum of 48 hours in order to investigate that. So there will be accountability and penalties where there is a violation. Again, with regard to Section 28, which is also a subject of the amendment in terms of this bill, which speaks to the procedure for bringing alleged abuser of older person before the magistrate. The gap is that it is not clear as to how that person has to be brought, whether it is a normal criminal case or this person has to be brought in terms of a specific process as per the court, and has created a lot of challenges, people challenging the procedure that has been followed and all that. So this particular provision, proposed provision, seeks to include subsection 6B, which will deal with how the person will be brought into book under those circumstances, so that at the end of the day, we see more convictions for elder abuse, because we hear so many stories about older persons being abused, but we don't hear about how many persons are being convicted for doing such. Again, in Section 28, which is also a subject for amendment in terms of this, there is also a gap in terms of bringing the older person that is the abuser before the magistrate. So this is actually in line with the subsection that is 6B that I referred to, because they must be read together as a matter of consequence, still in Section 28. Again, with regard to Section 30, there is a challenge with regard to the definition of physical abuse, where older persons are not protected from certain unlawful activities which may be construed as constituting physical abuse. So this section now is being amended in order to include unlawful detention of a person, medical sedation or shackling, deprivation of nutrition or medical care, neglect or exploitation of an older person in any manner in the definition of physical abuse. So in a way, so as to broaden the definition of physical abuse, not just limited to beating. So at the end of the day, we can see more and more convictions relating to all forms of abuse. This is actually in line with what the Constitution is saying, that a person must be protected from all forms of abuse, whether physical or emotional. They must be treated with dignity. So again, with regards to Section 30, which is also an amendment that this bill seeks to look at, because in terms of this particular provision at present, is that there are gaps in terms of empowering a clerk of the court or register to provide the minister with the details of an offender, conviction and sentence for the purposes of adding such information to the register upon conviction and sentence, because we need to ensure that the names of the perpetrators are included in the register for the abuse of the elderly. And there's a challenge at present in terms of how the department access those names from the court in order to populate the register, just like in the case of dealing with children, in terms of how we deal with this. So this particular provision at present makes it difficult to get the details of persons convicted of abuse of older persons as opposed to the abuse of children. So there is a need, therefore, to amend it in order to insert subsection 5, which will state that a court must do ABC, like the clerk of the court must, upon a conviction of a person, forthwith provide the minister with the details of the offender. So at the end of the day, as to ensure that that person is listed in the register. Because at the end of the day, we need to see more convictions for elder persons who are abusing older persons, and at the end of the day, prohibiting them from working with the older persons. So this is what this seeks to achieve. The amendment to section 31, which speaks to the keeping of register of abuse of older persons, which is the scenario at present, because there is a problem around keeping of such register, because there is no provision in terms of how to remove persons who were erroneously put in the register. So this amendment will seek to insert subsection 3, which will deal with an application to the minister for the removal of a name in case there was an error with regard to having the person's name in the register. With regard to section 33, which is one of the amendments and probably the one of the last amendments, the current scenario is that there are gaps in penalties for persons convicted of an offense related to specific provisions of the Act. So more offenses are left unpunished, and also the perpetrators walk free at the end of the day. So that is what this particular provision seeks to do at the end of the day. It seeks to insert more penalties to enforce them at the end of the day in areas of non-compliance to registration, monitoring and evaluation of services, and investigation of elder abuse cases, amongst other things. So this is to ensure that proper measures are put in place before closing down of facilities, and that older persons are placed appropriately and for non-compliance with regard to any transgression in terms of the existing legislation, that is the Principal Act. So in other words, this is trying to say there are so many prohibitions in terms of the existing legislation, but it is very much silent in terms of the penalties that must ensue once such a perpetrator has been brought to book, or a person has not complied with the registration process and all that. Because of such challenges, there is a need to have a long list of penalties in terms of the legislation, so that at the end of the day, everything is in order. So basically, that is the scenario in terms of this particular piece of legislation, which we are placing before your good selves, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, where we recommend that you take note of the process that has been followed and the content and the nature of these provisions, so that you can process it further as a committee. I thank you, Chair and Honorable Members.
Chair, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of that presentation. But maybe just before we conclude, I want to ask if Isabella and Cyril have any inputs to add to what was provided. We start with Cyril. Very quickly, if you could just, if there are important points that you felt that were left out of the presentation, can I ask you to talk to it? We can put that mic on. Thanks. Cyril? two things that we may have left out.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson, members, and the leadership present here, Minister. Also, I just want to indicate that one of the key things that was of concern to the sector generally was the fact that the Older Persons Act was not aligned to the Social Assistance Act, which then defined the older person as a female who was 60 years and a male who was 65 years old. And this was in conflict with Section 9 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. And this definition on its own was discriminatory in nature. And the new definition now says an older person is any person who is 60 years old and above. But also Section 3, which speaks to the implementation of the Act, indicates that it is the responsibility of all organs of state to implement the Act, but the roles and responsibilities were not applied. We have moved to a point where we have started engaging with various government departments and key stakeholders to ensure that we engage them in terms of the core areas where we want them to work with us to ensure that we comprehensively implement the Act. And we do find it difficult, I must also indicate, to fully get cooperation of key government departments to ensure integration and coordination. We do also to the fact that we do know that there are serious budgetary cuts, so resourcing and prioritization of the provision of services to older persons becomes a challenge for other, key government departments. And this is one journey that we are not going to give up on as a Department of Social Development, as the Minister has already indicated. We view, the role of other key stakeholders in implementing fully this legislative framework as being quite an important measure. But I must also indicate that one of the key things that drove us to really look into this legislative framework was mainly to ensure that we got synergized to the international, regional, and local legislative frameworks and international instruments and agreements that we have entered into as a country, looking at the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, looking at the African Protocol on Human and People's Rights, which includes our older persons, as well as the Africa Union Framework on Aging, but also to ensure that we responded to some of the issues that I've just raised, which aligned us as a department to the expectations and imperatives of our constitution as a country. And lastly, just to also emphasize that the areas that have been really, looked into, they echo the importance of the safety, the dignity, the importance of the protection of the well-being and security of our older persons, because this is what is integral to all the key areas that have been revisited, but also to ensure that we begin to become responsive as a department and that we level the playing field in terms of working with all our key role players in this regard. And hence, we have now established a forum where we're trying to work with various government departments. We've outlined roles and responsibilities, and we are working together. And we hope that in the ultimate end, we'll be able to realize, our intended goal. Lastly, also to indicate that in terms of the abuse of older persons, we have moved quite at length to make sure that we put systems in place to respond to the scourge of abuse of older persons. We've noted that what DG was saying in terms of what happened in Limpopo. Limpopo happened to be one of the provinces that actually had heightened levels of abuse and killings of older persons. Yes, at this point in time, I must indicate that due to some of the interventions that the province has actually embarked upon, the heightened levels have actually gone down. But we are now also seeing rising numbers within the Eastern Cape province, and we are also picking that up happening in KZN. And we, as part of the initiatives, the department embarked on a joint initiative with the Eastern Cape province to engage with key stakeholders, SAPs, various government departments, to look into what was the actual cause, but also targeting, and making sure that there were extensive engagements with traditional leaders, the youth within the areas, but also to make sure that we began to have that collaborative approach to dealing with matters. And that was quite a huge success, and it took place last year. And out of that, we have started coming up with a strategy that is going to assist us in terms of making sure that we look at the national picture, because as I indicated, these levels of abuse are now also heightening in KZN, and we're looking forward to making sure that we provide provinces in terms of guidance and we work with them in responding to some of these key areas. Lastly, from my side, I just want to also indicate that there is an expectation in terms of Section 31 of this piece of legislation that there's need for registration, for a register of abuse to be kept by the Minister of Social Development, which she has currently facilitated. The department has started with that process, and we have also embarked upon a wide initiative of training all our key stakeholders, provinces, and our NPOs. We're trying to target all key stakeholders within the space of provision of older persons to make sure that people understand the importance of the register, but that we also do not have a register that is not serving the purpose that it needs to serve. Advocate Mutotisa referred to the low rates of conviction of cases of older persons, and we do want to ensure that where there are cases that have been reported, we successfully, have those being taken through the justice system. And we are now working with the Department of Justice to make sure that older persons do not walk this journey alone. When they do go through the court systems, we have now, reached an agreement with the Department of Justice, and we have now amended the legislation to indicate the importance of intermediaries, and that our older persons also testify in camera and that they receive the support from intermediaries. Let me pause it there. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks very much. So, Isabella, is there any inputs? We are covered. Honorable Chair, thank you very much. I think we'll stop it there. I thought it was important for Civil to just provide that input as well. So we bring some meaning in a true sense in terms of some of the challenges that we are trying to address through this particular piece of legislation. Thank you very much, Chair. I think we'll end it there and hand over back to yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Acting Chief, and also the presenters. Now, I think it's the time for deliberation. The time is 1 minute to 11. Deliberations by members of committee. I like section 25 and section 30. It means that I also fall under the elder person. It was good. Thank you very much for the presentation. Honorable Kizela's hand is up. Honorable Mangani. Honorable Matsidi Somfikwe, Honorable Abraham, and Honorable Paul Need, and Honorable Arisio. Okay, let's shoot Honorable Kizel.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. I have a couple of general common questions of the lived reality on the ground. And then I have clarity-seeking questions regarding the Older Persons Amendment Bill. On my general questions, I want to know, how are we protecting older people from loan sharks? Because that constitutes as financial abuse. Because loan sharks takes their SASSA cards so they say when it's without their consent, it's illegal. But what if they take their SASSA cards with their consents? Because this is a big concern, especially in our rural areas. And then many older people's wills are being changed because of dependency for care. And this also constitutes as financial abuse. How can we protect older persons from giving power of attorney over out of fear and force? And then abuse claims are often based on what the older person says. So how do you report and where do you report mistreatment in cases where elderly people cannot voice their concerns anymore? Then regarding to the amendment bill for older persons, I want to focus on clause 13(1) capital A. It currently allows only for juristic persons and trusts to look after older persons. It also cross-reference to 18(1)B. I want to know, why can a partnership or a sole proprietorship not be allowed to care for older persons? What are the reasoning behind only juristic persons and trust to look after older persons? And can a possible amendment not allow for any person who is suitably registered and qualified to take care of older persons? Then clause 18(1)A and B, it says that private residential facility. What does that definition include? Does it exclude family members in their own private residence receiving care or giving care to all the family members, or does it include family members in their own private residence? And 18(1)B, again, why can a partnership or sole proprietorship not be allowed to care for older persons? In clause 18 capital A, subclause D, what steps will be taken if someone of a deregistered or closed down facility refuses to cooperate with or obstructs an authorized person on behalf of the DG or the department? Will this clause not cause unnecessary prosecutions in the end? And will it then be part of section 33 as an offense? In clause 25, capital A to B, if we consider the various court backlogs and the shortages of magistrates and judges currently, will it be possible to obtain a court order within 48 hours? And you have to take in consideration that the courts are not reasonably nearby in our rural areas, and there has to be the grounds of urgency. The grounds of urgency needs to be met for any urgent application. Will 48 hours be reasonable then, and will this then fall into another category? On clause 25 category B, I want to know, why is there a distinction between older persons with or without disabilities or chronic conditions? Because in my view, older persons are considered a vulnerable group as a whole. Chairperson.
Thank you, Gisela. Can we request the presenter advocate to remove the slides until we request them? Thank you. The following honorable member is Honorable Manganyi.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I must also appreciate the presenters that gave us this information. My question that I want to put forward is this one. I understand safety and well-being of older person. And then I want to know, because this older person, as Honorable Aris have asked the question first, is also in the ministry, in the presidency. I want to know, how are we going to monitor? Because they also supposed to monitor the older persons. So I want to know, is us who's monitoring, or is the minister in the presidency dealing with older person, and also as this side dealing with the bill. Are we not going to clash? Why I'm asking this question is because we are having the gender-based violence, and then it also resides with the ministry and the presidency. At the end of the day, is the social development that is struggling. You know, the issue of accounting around the table, it doesn't assist. Others hide behind others. So I wanted to know, how are we going to deal with it? Lastly, Chair, I want to dwell on this 25B, Chair. I see here that we are saying in any matter concerning an older person with chronic illness, due to consideration must be given to. So I wanted to know, because here we didn't mention, I didn't see, maybe I have missed it. I didn't see it where also the Department of Health is held accountable, because they have to be held accountable even somewhere here, not people who are also looking after the elderly. Because sometimes you can go 2 to 3 months not having medication. So they must be put here so that they must be held accountable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Manganye. The next one is Honorable Sikwa.
Thanks, Chair.
Honorable Matsibisi.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to you, members, honorable members, and the minister and the team. Just a few points. Mine is more on 7B, Chair, protecting the rights of the elderly in relation to property in particular. Part of what is happening that I'm not sure if the department is aware on is where the elderly are being taken out of their houses, mainly by their grandchildren, some of them because they need to pay a particular debt, or the houses are taken over by people that these children owe debt with. I will give a case in point, Chair. Before I was put into Parliament, we dealt with a case in Soweto in Middleland of a 110-year-old late grandmother who was taken out of her house because her great-granddaughter had sold the house to somebody who it was alleged was selling drugs in the area. We had to go in, fight. Ultimately, the old lady was brought back to the house. Just last week, I was told that she was taken back to her house. But as we were dealing with that, a whole lot of people came up complaining about either the daughters-in-laws whose husbands had died, or has taken the elderly people out of their houses. So I'm not sure what is 7B in relation to property saying. The acting DG spoke about an example of elderly being taken out of their houses because of allegations of witchcraft. But I'm pulling this in as well as one thing that we probably need to focus on, because it is so sad. I mean, if some of us who are on Twitter would have seen the grandmother being marched outside her house by these young kids. You know, she was walking with a walking stick. She seemed very confused as well as to what was happening up until we picked up the issue. So for me, I would want that when we're talking about protecting their right to property, we expand on it and probably break it down a bit so that it's clear what are we talking about. I know here probably the minister might need to get in touch with the Minister for Human Settlement, because it also relates to corruption that is happening at the deeds office, including at municipal housing offices that are keeping records of who owns a house when. and also engaging with the Minister of Justice, because this guy of the 110-year-old claimed that he has a court order, but he failed to show us the court order. So clearly they're working with the police, they're working with the justice department, the magistrate's offices, one way or the other, for them to go to get these bogus court orders. So if Minister could also start engaging with the two ministries as well, so that we see how we're assisting and protecting the right of tenure of these old people, because it is so sad, you know. I mean, I was very touched by the 110-year-old. Hence, one stood up and entered into the fight to protect her house. My last point, Chair, will be two last points. Maybe for property-related issues, Minister and the team could think about it, whether we need a special tribunal, you know, where we could, the tribunal could be a friend to these old people in the making sure that if they're taken to court, then the tribunal could look at how do we assist into unlocking whatever needs to be unlocked, because a whole lot of them, especially this happens in urban areas, Chair. So if we could, Minister can think, and the team, if there's a need to have the special tribunal to focus on protecting the right of tenure of the elderly. My last point would be in the implementation. We were doing it nationally. There are provincial departments as well of social development. And I know the minister would be sitting with the MECs in the MINMEC, but how do we, and it talks to monitoring and evaluation the implementation. You know, we have a responsibility to protect the elderly and the children. That is a national clarion call. So how do we make sure that beyond MEC ministers meeting, then going down to the administrators, are the SLAs or some legal arrangements that people that are supposed to be implementing can be taken to task if they do not implement? Because if we fail to protect the elderly and the vulnerable, then we're really not helping in taking the country forward. So for me, those would be the issues, Chair, that I would like. Some of them are just charity seeking, but I'm proposing that we expand on the protection of property for the elderly so that we are clear what our aspects are we looking at. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Matsitiso. Honorable Alex Abrams, followed by Paul Neat and Letitia.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning to you and to colleagues and the Minister and the Department. Thank you for the presentation. Chairperson, my comments are as follows, and I won't repeat, you know, some of the comments mentioned earlier, but I do agree with most of the colleagues who spoke before me. Chairperson, one of my main concerns is that, you know, the position and post for director care and services to older persons, you know, has been vacant for many years, and that will hamper the implementation of this act. So I'd just like to hear from the department, you know, if we're taking this bill seriously and we're taking the care for older persons seriously, when can we lift the moratorium on this post? And then, you know, when are we going to be advertising and filling this director for care and services to older persons position? Then, Chairperson, maybe it's in the bill, but I didn't see it. So if the department can please also just clarify, how will this bill address the issue of standardization of subsidies to old age homes across the country? And, you know, when I speak about subsidies, I also then group in, you know, salary payments to staff at these facilities. Because, you know, it requires a real special person, you know, to care with patience and kindness. And it's more than a job at these facilities. And, you know, I've heard some stories about how the nurses and the staff, you know, they aren't really paid well, you know, at these facilities. Then, Chairperson, with regard to the B, section with the bill, section 3D5, I just want absolute clarity. I mean, the ADG did say DSD is leading this bill, but it also mentions the Office of the Premier. So just to clarify, is it the Office of the Premier or is it DSD again? Then section 8C, there's no timeframes attached to the service provider when they giving their notice and intention to stop the service, unless this timeframe is in the Principal Act, and if so, if they can just point out, the timeframes involved. Must the service provider give 90 days, 60 days, 30 days notice? I share the same sentiments about the 48 hours with regard to magistrate courts, if it's not stretching given the backlogs at court. And then Section AA, close down operations immediately within 24 hours. So what happens to the seniors during and after this 24 hours? I understand if it's a social activity group, that can be stopped in 24 hours, but a residential facility, it might be a struggle. But also, who bears the responsibility to ensure measures to accommodate or relocate the beneficiaries of the service? Is it DSD's responsibility, or will it be the facility's responsibility? Because if you're closing down for whatever reason, the well-being of those seniors might be second on your priority list. Then, Chairperson, and I think the Honourable Member before me spoke about it, Section 25 AC, the removal of an older person from his or her home environment. And, Chairperson, this is something that all victims, even victims of gender-based violence, have to be put through, that they are taken out of their homes while perpetrators remain in the home. And here we have vulnerable seniors being plucked from their homes, and, yes, they've been removed because of their well-being, but, then we're moving them into temporary safe cares, which can also further disorientate them. And then they're only there for 6 months, and then they need to be moved again. And, it's difficult to find these safe spaces, in their areas. So then they'll be taken out of their areas, further away from their family and friends, further away from the places of worship that they choose to go to. And then my question becomes, do we even have capacity at our temporary safe care facilities to then make sure that these seniors still attend their social clubs, still attend the places of worship of their choice? Because I just don't see that we have the capacity for that, and yet we've removed this person. And while I understand it's a practical thing to do, because our immediate concern is to protect that older person, it's just extremely unfair that then the perpetrators get to continue with life as if nothing happens. And, in most cases, or some cases, it's an orchestrated plot to get these seniors out of their houses in order to then take ownership of their homes. Then, Chairperson, Section 3018A, I would like to, I think I've missed one. Yes. Oh, no, sorry. Section 2616A. Why have we not included the health professionals in those categories? And then, Chairperson, with regard to Section 3018A, which speaks to physical abuse, I would just like to get clarity. So, therefore, no health professional can turn away a sick person. I just want to get clarity on that, because then my question comes into, government facilities. So if there's no medication at clinics, then as government, we are guilty of this physical abuse with regard to medical care. And you know what, Chairperson, even SASSA, I would then argue that standing in long queues in SASSA queues, that is physical abuse on our seniors, and therefore SASSA is actually guilty according to this act. And then, lastly, Chairperson, perhaps the department can also provide us with a list of their temporary safe care facilities across the country, because, we interact with seniors and we sometimes get called, and it'd just be great to have that information and contact details of where these places are, so that we can also provide assistance. And then just lastly, Chairperson, I just so happened to visit 2 private old age homes yesterday. And it's really, and the topic that came up, it's really, really heartbreaking that our senior citizens surviving on 1,900, and we'll hear later today if it's 1,990 rand, you know, that they just can't survive. The cost of living for them, it's ridiculous, and they just can't survive. Many of them are on medication. They need to eat food, and they aren't able to cope. And while I understand it's private residential facilities, you know, where they take the whole pension, and then these seniors are just maybe given a 70 rand a month, and that's what they must live on. And it just, I don't know, it further just takes away from their dignity and independence that this is allowed to happen. So while I understand that we have minimal, you know, input when it comes to private organizations, I just really think it's something that needs to be looked at, because some of these private accommodations, they charge in like 900 rand rent. And I know you might not find it elsewhere at 900 rand a month rent, but then they've got 1,000 rand to live on. And it just further diminishes and takes away from their dignity and independence. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Abrams. Go to Honorable Aris. Honorable Aris.
Chairperson, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairperson. I think that is one of those things when you speak last, you are mostly covered by all the other previous speakers. However, I totally agree with what Honorable Jane was saying, that I think the biggest challenge that our elderly is facing, and that we are busy with this bill, that how will this bill ensure that, you know, our elderly get priority services, whether it's in housing, whether it's in health, and Alex was just mentioning it, that our elderly must stand in queues. The other important thing is because there's also discrimination still, because I want to see that this bill also address this issue of where the elderly person's spouse is still working or receiving a state pension, then they just get a portion of their SASSA pensions, which I feel is unfair, it's discriminating, because right now we need to get to a point where elderly people are entitled to the full benefits of their pension. But not only that, as Honorable Alex was saying, the 1,990 is nothing. If we look at currently, I mean, we are struggling in the country, and we really need to look at, you know, to increase the increase of our people's elderly pension that they are receiving every month. I think other than that, I'm covered by all the previous speakers, because that's the sad part when you are speaking lastly, everybody is covering what you want to say. But yes, as I cannot emphasize more, because there are people that are 70, 80, 90 years old that will never, ever have a house that they can call their own. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Aris and Honorable Polnitz.
Thank you,
You'll be the
Chairperson.
last one.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, you know, this is a very heart-sore topic. You know, it is very close to our hearts. That's why everyone is talking. And it's like Honorable Aris was saying, most of the things was covered. But I want to say also, Chairperson, you know, there's some NPOs that is having this old age homes at homes, you know, that is doing a great job, that is sitting with old people that the children never come and visit them. They are just being dropped there without anyone coming back. And that person that is running the old age home, she puts in everything. She makes sure that they have funeral benefits, they have their food, they have everything. But then the department will come, the social workers will even bring old people there. But then at the end of the day, they are still being discriminated against because they are running from home. The thing is running from home. So I just want to find out from the department is how can they make it easier for people that is having these old age homes, running from their houses, doing an excellent job, and then the department come and ask all the things from them, and when everything is in order, they are not getting what they are supposed to get, assistance from the department. And then I also want to agree with all the other speakers is that we are also forgetting about the older people that is having mental issues, that where the person is mentally disabled. So you can't go to an ordinary old age home. You have to go to a mental old age home. And we lack facilities like that because you will come to town and you will see an old lady that is mentally not right. And then she's on the street, sleeping on the street, and there's no one taking care of her. That is so hard. So when you see an older person like that. And then I also want to agree with the previous speaker's chair is that, the SASSA money, when you stay by yourself and you can look after yourself and you can do everything for yourself, but the SASSA money that you are getting is not even enough for your electricity, for your food, for paying your rates and your water. I think we must have a look at this thing of SASSA. When you have a SASSA grant and you're an older person, that they must give extension for water. They must give some alleviation on water and electricity for these older persons because the electricity is sky high and we cannot cope with all this payments, Chairperson. And then also the medication. A lot of times I'm one of the people that is working at the old age home that I adopted, the two of them. I will go to the hospital to Paranome to go pick up the medication. And sometimes the way that the nurses are treating these old people, because I take them to hospital and I will go pick them up with the lady that is working there, the old age home. And then sometimes it is so disgusting because you are basically shouting at your mother. Sometimes we need to learn how to speak to older people because, the Bible teaches us very good at, respect your mother, respect your elders, your mother and your father, and they will be lengthened. And sometimes the nurses are very rude to these old people. And when you go pick up the medicine, it's like they are doing you a favor. So seriously, and then also the same department that we are talking about of drug abuse, a lot of these old people are being abused by their own grandchildren and great-grandchildren because they want drug money. So as soon as the SASSA card come in, the money come in, these SASSA cards have been stolen by their grandchildren and taken for drugs. Then those very same old people must go and lend money just to survive during the month. They are being physically abused, mentally abused, and financially abused. And it is so hard to see that these things are happening, and sometimes all these things look nice on paper, but the implementation of these things is not happening on the ground. So we need to make a way of how this thing is going to go down to the grass level, the grassroots, and everyone in the departments know if a person are being abused, what must happen, how must you handle the person. It's the same case with the rape case. You go to the police station, the policeman want to speak in front of everyone that you've been raped. How is that what is that doing to a person? Because you are standing there in front, you're having a crisis, and then they shout it out like the whole world must know about it. So yes, this bill is very important, Chairperson, and I feel that we need to do something to assist people, because some of these people have been working for years. They have contributed to the country by paying their taxes, but when they are old, it's like they are forgotten. They are no longer important, and they are mothers and grandmothers, Chairperson. So this is my contribution. Thank you so much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, honorable members and Honorable Murray. Most of the questions revolve around monitoring on how the department is gonna do it. As Honorable Abrams has just said and mentioned that there are old age homes where elder people are getting 70 rands.
back from their grant. But there are old age homes where they don't even get a cent. And when you ask from them, do you get 50 rand as a change just to buy sweets and whatever that you think we need? They will say, no, we don't get any. And those old age homes are being subsidized by the government. I'm also interested on how are we going to monitor this old age, and what is it that we are supposed to do if we get those situations in our communities, understanding that that's abuse. The case needs to be opened, but there are steps that needs to be followed first. The other one that is very, very critical and serious. I heard the advocate mentioning the register. You know, I don't know this register. Is there a way that we are able to get it for our constituency offices? I know it's confidential, but how are we going to know the cases of the elder people are being followed to success? I am not sure. I appreciate this one of the presentation of the amendment. I understand that this is the amendment and we have to deal with the presentation in front of us in line with the amendment bill, which I also appreciate. Yes, there was also a question of the scoparers, the loan sharks, which I think we have also to strengthen it, because what happens in our communities, these grannies are being harassed and are being abused. Their cards are being taken by the loan sharks. Something needs to be stronger in the bill, especially in this amendment bill, so as to protect them. Thanks ever so much. Let me give over to the department to answer concerns and questions that have been posed by honorable members. Thanks. Over to you, department.
Chair, thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Let me really appreciate the comments and in some cases suggestions from the honorable members. I think this is a very important subject matter that must be given the due attention that it deserves, because at some point we will get to that age as well. And so we've got to make sure that whatever we put in place, it secures the current generation, which are in the bracket of older persons, but it also ensures that we're able to make things simple and services accessible to the future generations. And I think that this is an important aspect. I may come back to it a little bit later. Let's then respond to some of the questions. These are very useful questions. I think what I will do is I will share amongst the colleagues. I would like Dr. Maureen to come first and respond to the questions on the old age grant in terms of the needs test, as well as the loan sharks. Dr. Maureen, if you can quickly come in. After Dr. Maureen, I'll ask Sybil to come in and respond to some of the M&E questions that have been raised and so on. Dr. Maureen?
Thank you, DG. Thank you, members of the Portfolio Committee. I will start with the question on loan sharks. The question on loan sharks, we are currently aware that some of the beneficiaries are leaving their cards with the loan sharks, and what we are making them aware that is that it's illegal for any loan shark to hold a card of beneficiaries. That is the first thing. What we have done as a department, we have developed a book on basic finance. And in that book, we address the issue on loan sharks. So we are currently going through the country, informing beneficiaries of their rights on in relation to this particular area on loan sharks, what they are supposed to do, what is the grant supposed to be used for. So that is the action that the department has done. The book has been developed 3 years back, and we have done, we are currently in the process of going throughout the country. The second thing is we are intending to put the book on, because it's a book for beneficiaries, on our website as well as the website of SASSA, so that beneficiaries can get hold of that book on financial literacy or basic finance for social grant beneficiaries. That's the first question on loan sharks. The second question is the question regarding the means test. Indeed, when it comes to means test of older persons, we consider joint income of both spouses. And we are currently aware that this particular clause inconvenience one of the spouses, especially if the other spouse is not willing to share the income with the other beneficiaries. What we are considering and we are discussing internally is to look at how best can we consider reviewing our legislation in such a way that we address these two spouses, because according to Section 27, every individual has the right to access social assistance. So we are considering reviewing, looking at individual assessment rather than spousal assessment. Thank you, DG. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maureen. Advocate Bree, do you want to add to that?
Thank you so much, DG, and thank you, Dr. Maureen. Just to indicate and to confirm with what Dr. Maureen said, is that in terms of the Act, the Social Assistance Act, not the Older Persons Bill, but the Social Assistance Act, there is a penalty clause of offences. If a person, for instance, sees the card, or if a person is caught in possession of a card, that person is either guilty or can be fined or combinedly for up until 15 years imprisonment. So I think that is quite significant. And then also what the department is further doing at SASSA is to ensure that there's specific provisions in the new social assistance regulations that prohibits even these loan sharks to enter into a radius of 100 meters within the agency or any local pay point of SASSA. But I think what is very important is that our honourable members also, like Dr. Maureen indicated, populate and disseminate this information to the elderly, that they know that there's actually offences, and also that there is protection clauses for them in order to protect them. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thanks, Advocate Brink. I'm going to ask Sowell to respond to some of the questions and monitoring and evaluation.
Okay, thank you very much, TG, and thank you, honourable members and Chairperson. I would like to first start with the question that was raised around protecting the rights of older persons, specifically linked to Section 7B of the legislation. And in that regard, I think it's important to note that we cover the issues of the rights of older persons to property, their rights to inheritance, as well as their rights, not to be physically abused, or for that matter, to be abused in any form. And to that effect, where we drew, the support for the crafting of this particular section was also in terms of Article 9 of the Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of older persons in Africa. So one of the things that we also note, especially in terms of issues of what happens when our older people are being removed from their households, it's also, yes, indeed linked to how they eventually get to be abused. And it's important also to note that there are there are various reasons as to why we find our older people being abused. Some of them, and there is silence. The problem that we really have in this space is that in many instances, these cases do not get reported. And even if somebody reports the matter, sometimes there is embarrassment or lack of willingness to go forward and really get the case to go through the justice system. And it's simply linked to issues of lack of understanding of their rights in many instances. And that is why the major issue and area of focus should be made to make sure that we create and sensitize our older persons in terms of their rights, create that awareness in terms of them understanding, what is it that, impedes on their dignity and integrity, and to understand, the processes that they need to follow, but also empowering their families to make sure that they do also understand. And I'm saying families specifically because we regard families as primary caregivers of our older persons, and they are responsible for taking care of their own older persons. And where the families are unable to effectively respond, then the state must then kick in to assist and guide the family in terms of how to assist them. But we also sit with a challenge, with South Africa being now an aging population, but also looking at the fact that as we are gathered here this morning, we have just over 9.1% of the total population of South Africa being older persons, which is 5.43 million of the total population of South Africa. And that really says to us all the issues that we are raising, which indeed are sore issues to engage on, but they are real issues that we really need to start talking seriously about, because if the population is growing at this pace, the country must be ready to respond to the needs of our older persons. And that is where the issue comes in of the importance of a concerted effort in dealing with issues of aging. And specifically also, because as people grow older, health issues also kick in. The importance of the role of the Department of Health in collaborating effectively with the Department of Social Development, especially with the fact that we've just, received the final decade of healthy aging, which is going to be guiding us for the upcoming 30 years in terms of making sure that the needs of older persons are effectively cared for. And that cannot be the responsibility of the Department of Social Development alone. It will require the concerted efforts of various ministers to support the Minister of Social Development, who is the custodian of the older persons legislation. Now, we do note, the importance of taking care of some of the issues that have been raised by members that are linked to Section 7B of the legislation. And indeed, members are correct in terms of the issues that they are raising. And on the issue of Alzheimer's and dementia, I think we do note, that in many instances there aren't special facilities which are there to take care of people with Alzheimer's and dementia, but they are part of the population and they will be cared for in the same facilities where we have people who suffer from mental conditions. And in this regard, it is also important to note that Alzheimer's and dementia do not necessarily impact on older persons alone. It does affect people, even ranging from the ages of 30. People do get affected by this particular, diseases. So the issue of the prioritization and re-looking into how best can the key departments in this space begin to really elevate and resource Alzheimer's and dementia care is quite important. And issues of geriatrics, the availability of gerontologists and so forth, those are critical issues that need to get into the debates that are going to be guided by the decade of healthy aging, which is going to be guiding us for the coming 50 years in terms of how we need to deal with issues of older persons. on to the issue of reporting, which I should have actually linked to the section 7B, I think it's important that we also note that the Department of Social Development, in terms of making sure that there is awareness and the support of older persons within communities, has established the South African Older Persons Forum, and this forum also has got its subsidiaries across the 9 provinces, and at national level, we work with the National South African Older Persons Forum, and the National Department funds that forum to make sure that it serves as a voice and also as ears for older persons on the ground, but it also works and supports the provincial South African Older Persons Forum. And as DG indicated, those forums are quite active, but we do note that there will of course be limitations because we really want these forums to be constituted by older persons themselves, and of course issues of limitations will obviously be there, but the department really endeavors to support these forums, and we work very, very closely with them to make sure that issues of older persons receive the necessary attention. And then on the issue of the inclusion of costing on the legislation, I just want to indicate to members that there's a separate costing report which was developed by the department, working with an external provider to make sure that we re-look into how effectively can we ensure the implementation of the legislation. But that costing exercise relied on our primary funding that we do have in terms of the provision of services to older persons within the department and at TSD provincial level. But we also need to have other government departments, key government departments also availing resources and so on to make sure that we effectively deal with this matter. On the issue of monitoring of facilities, we do work with provinces to make sure that the facilities for older persons are monitored. And what is important in that regard is that if National is conducting the monitoring exercise, they also, engage with provinces, and there are reports that are done for those particular facilities during those particular visits, and the reports need to guide in terms of the gaps that have been picked up, what are the proposed interventions, the timeframes that are attached to the interventions that need to kick in, and also to agree on, who plays what role in that regard. And as such, the improvement plan should then be in place to ensure that the issues that have been picked up really receive the necessary attention. And then I think DG maybe lastly to touch on the issue of something that I also want to talk about. Okay, it was on the issue of the register. We were asked whether the register can be available. It's got different parts or sections. There's a section that we can avail. Obviously, the other part of it we cannot avail due to the protection of the identities of those that are there in the register, but also to indicate that we have just embarked on a process with the Department of Justice, working on the GBV Act to make sure that we also protect and avail the necessary services by the Department of Justice to our older persons. And in this regard, there have been a series of webinars which are also aimed at making sure that there is sensitization and awareness giving and promotion to our older persons out there. And I must also indicate that those webinars are well attended, and we take it that it's a clear indication that people on the ground have become aware of that, and they are willing to actually also play their parts.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Cyril. Isabella, you want to add to that?
Thank you very much, DG. Good morning, Minister. Good morning, Chairperson and members of the Portfolio Committee. Yeah, I just want to talk to the issue of funding. The subsidy is, it is also a very serious concern with us as the department, because we understand that the service that is being rendered, it really costs much more than okay. Yeah, the services that is being rendered cost much more than what we are funding as the department. And to that effect, we've been able to work together with National Treasury to develop an NPO sector funding policy together with the guidelines for funding for DST. And we have been able to say what are the services that needs to be prioritized, and older person services are part of those services that needs to be prioritized. However, having said that, we still have to mobilize for resources, because with the current budget that we are having, it will be very difficult for us to be able, to fund the NGOs more as we really want them to do. As we started with working on this with National Treasury, we want to believe that I think they will be able to assist us in terms of supporting us on that. I want to go to the issue of the 48 hours investigation that our honorable member has spoken about. When you look at the 48 hours that we have spoken about, it's about conducting an investigation. It's not about going to court, because it says the Director General, Social Worker, Police, or whoever must investigate within 48 hours. And if there is suspicion, it's substantiated. If the suspicion is substantiated by investigation, Section 25(4) applies with necessary modification. This it has been pulled so that we don't leave this investigation at the discretion of the officials, because it might take long. So we give them, the time frames to have, looked at, the matter. Now, coming to the issue of removal of older persons, yes, it's a very genuine and concerned issue that has been raised by members. However, having said that, at that moment, you find that the older person is helpless, and the life of the older person is at risk. And we really need to protect the older person. Hence, we need to remove the older person, having assessed the risks. And that is why the investigation within 48 hours is very critical, so that we can be able to determine as to whether we have to take the older person back to that environment, whilst other interventions are kicking off. Maybe the law enforcement is doing what it is supposed to do. So that's the reason behind it. I think the other issues will be responded by advocate. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Isabella. Luyanda, can you come in now?
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable members. I think colleagues have covered most of the issues that have been raised. It's important for me to first thank the members who have asked the questions. They've really opened our eyes with regard to some provisions that we need to work on further. We must take into account that this is one of the initial stages for the further development of this bill, so that if there are any clarities that we need to effect, we'll be able to do so as we move along. However, it is important to first deal with the issue of the juristic persons versus understanding here is that in many instances, the funding that gets to be awarded for the provision of these services is usually given to the juristic persons as NPOs, NGOs, and the likes. And they are more stable financially than individuals. So that could be one of the considerations to say, if an individual is going to be entrusted with elderly persons and all that, and sometimes they run out of food, as we have seen in life as Esidimeni, what then happens under those circumstances when an individual cannot cope with taking care of such persons. So these are the issues that we have taken note in dealing with this. And again, when we speak of protection of the elderly, we must not also we must also take into account the issue of legislation and prohibits any discrimination against anyone based on age, specifically in this particular issue. So this legislation, once passed into law, will be read together with other pieces of legislation. And the issue of monitoring and in the how part of it, yes, some of these issues will be dealt with in the regulations that will ensue from these, provisions or clauses that are proposed once they get to be passed into law. And with regard to the 48-hour period, which DG ISA has indicated or clarified, just to indicate that sometimes when we craft these provisions, we put the bare minimum and speak of within 48 hours, within 2 days, within 4 days, within 96 hours and all that. So it is important maybe as we process this particular bill further, we look at the ideal time period that will be able to satisfy all of us, having looked at all the issues that we may need to take into account. And the issue of the refusal for the closure of these particular institutions by those who are manning them at present, we need also to take into indicating that the penalty will be able to deal with such situations when they come as empowered by this particular piece of legislation once it is finally made into law. And the issue of the implementation and the monitoring, therefore, account the issue of it being an intergovernmental issue in terms of Section 76, which we are going to look at it in that particular context, so that at the end of the day, each sphere of government plays its role in a manner that is envisaged or consistent with this particular piece of legislation. And the issue of property, as has been indicated, how will we deal with the protection of the elderly from the deprivation of property? Well, we need to take into account, as I've said, that we need to read this particular document in line with existing, the provision is there in the Constitution. No one may be arbitrarily deprived of his or her property. Is already protecting. It's a question of properly implementing this particular provision, which we need to work on. And was also teacher and in their origin. So it may be very difficult to have a cut-off kind of provision and say this is how we are going to ensure that the elderly are not deprived of that which belongs to them as property. Because if you get deeper into a particular case, you might find that a particular case is justified because the person who is occupying the house, despite the age, is actually not the rightful owner of that particular property. It may have been a generational problem in the family that needs to be sorted out, because parents do die, leaving their children in the hands of the grandparents in the house that actually belong to the parents and the children themselves. But children are still young, and as they grow, they grow up understanding that the house belongs to grandma or grandpa, only to discover 30 years later that, by the way, this house was the house belonging to our parents. It's just that now we need our house back as children. So that's why I'm saying these cases are not very straightforward. So it is very difficult to have a provision that says this is what the particular case it serves of the provision of services. Yes, the Constitution is there. No one may be unfairly discriminated when it comes to the provision of services based on age, based on gender, based on many other things that are mentioned in the in the Constitution itself. And
Advocate Mthochisa,
So we've lost you completely.
asikufumani ngoku.
Nobona ababesithi uyakhumbula ne-NEF
Minister, you
even
are
these
unmuted.
bethi you know
Advocate.
insurance
You are now muted, Leander. Can you unmute?
Will you please unmute Advocate? And your background, mind your background. There's a noise.
Chair, I think what we will do, we seemingly have a bit of a challenge with Leander. Are we able to try and reach him? If not, this is what I would suggest. Let me come in and respond to some of the comments made so that we don't waste a lot of time. Let me try and deal with about 4 issues very quickly, Honorable Chair. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There was a question around the clarity with regards to blaming older persons in the presidency or the monitoring and evaluation aspects in terms of clashes, monitors, etc. So the way the system is configured is that as the custodians of the Act, you monitor the implementation of the Act at social development level. And what the Department of Monitoring, Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation will do is to monitor the specific aspects of the MTSF, which are whatever targets or priorities that have been set, and they monitor whether we as a department are doing that. But from a monitoring perspective in regards to the Act, that falls squarely within the department that is the custodian, which is ourselves. Then on the, so I hope that we've sort of clarified this one. We do work hand in hand with the Department of Monitoring.
I'm sorry, Acting DG.
Chair.
What is your response on this question?
So we're saying that as the custodian of the Act, we have to ensure the monitoring of the implementation of the Act. In other words, we are supposed to hold other government departments responsible and also ensure that we implement the specific areas of the Act. When the Department of Monitoring, Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, DPME, come in, they monitor the extent to which we are implementing the specific targets within the MTSF. So the National Development Plan would say there's certain, aspects that as a country we have to achieve by 2030. And those aspects that relate to older persons would be embedded into the 5-year plan, which is the medium-term strategic framework. And from that plan, we would then develop APP targets coming out of that. They monitor the implementation on our end with regards to the targets within the MTSF. So we monitor the implementation of the actual legislation across government departments and, of course, within the context of social development. But there is an interface that we have with the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. Anything else? So, that's fine. Oh, and then the aspect of the Premier's office. Sorry, Chair, is that okay? I just wanted to. When it comes to the Premier's offices, we still remain responsible. And it should be noted that the implementation happens at provincial level. And therefore, what we're saying is that the Premier's offices become critical to ensure the coordination of the protection of older persons. And also, all MEC is accountable in the usual form of the provision in terms of provision of services. It's also important to note that in terms of emergencies, Office of the Previous, where older persons rather are abused or encounter areas of gender-based violence, other legislative bodies kick in, and so, for example, the Domestic Violence Act, and so on and so forth. And we're able to assist, of course, with the prosecution orders. I think the other important thing I wanted to highlight is that it's more of a monitoring and evaluation aspect. We were bringing in the offices of the previous, but we've also realized that a lot of dependency is placed on social development, even within provinces, to deal with areas of older persons. But by nature or by virtue of it being, I suppose, a cross-cutting matter, it ought to flow from other government departments as well, and other MECs ought to also provide feedback and reporting to the Department of, the previous offices within provinces. But the Department of Social Development is still pivotal and still plays a role. Just on this area of cross-cutting areas, we still obviously have a very important role. We play the leadership role, but we work with other government departments to ensure the implementation of their own mandates. So in other words, we rely on departments like health, social, COGTA, human settlement, SAPS, and justice, etc., to also do their part insofar as implementing their pieces of legislation. And of course, those areas that come within the context of our act, we engage with them and hold them accountable accordingly. Then let me just quickly get to two more areas. I want to indicate that there is no moratorium on the director post. That is not the case. There isn't a moratorium on the post. I'm not sure why there's an assumption to that effect. But what we are undergoing, as we shared with the members when we presented our quarterly report, we are undergoing a reprioritization of posts aspects, and this is one of the posts that is within that context as well. Given the fact that we've had a serious reduction of COE budget from the Treasury for the remainder of the NTF period. So I've also just wanted to indicate. I want to agree, with honourable members, and in fact, I want to indicate that as a department, we strongly condemn all cases of abuse to older persons, we require law enforcement agencies to really address these challenges. And when we come across such instances, we're able to relate them to law enforcement agencies. There was a case in Mamelodi recently where the team intervened. There was a case in the Free States, I think it is, where the team intervened. So we are able to immediately work with law enforcement agencies. But as you would know, it's important that they do what they have to do in terms of their legislation, and ensure that the perpetrators are brought to book as quickly as possible. So we certainly denounce and or rather condemn any cases of abuse, especially honourable members, where it relates to corruption and fraudulent activities, particularly as it relates to the issue of properties, as the honourable members have indicated, and of course as it relates to loan sharks. There was a new aspect that we started dealing with at SASSA offices, where people would pay money to secure places in lines, etc. We've dealt with that issue. It's no longer happening, at least in terms of the information that has come to our disposal. And when we made aware of the loan sharks, we immediately ensure that we hand them over to law enforcement agencies. But we want to indicate, I think one of the honourable members did provide some proposals also in this regard. I think it's important, two things. One, that if we can get the detailed information of that particular area where the honourable member did indicate that, I think it was in Soweto. If we can get a little bit more details on that, we'd be happy to take that case on and look at it as well, and just see how things are going, and see how we can intervene and assist in that regard. We are also encourage communities, and part of our awareness programs is to make sure that communities actually report cases of abuse, particularly of abuse to older persons, whether it be family members or whether it be outsiders. It's important that community members report these cases, and we continue to plead with community so that the perpetrators are immediately brought to book. I do want to agree also about the areas of funding in terms of the money that is provided by SASSA. being inadequate. This is very true. I think we pay about 3.8 million older persons grants per annum as we speak. We are at around 3.8 million. Of course, this is growing, I think, of course, this is about 1,190. There's an increase that is effective this month actually to older persons grants, and we pay about 3.8 million. We spend about per annum about 92 billion rands per year on providing support through the old age grants, but we also allow older persons to qualify. Those who qualify, by the way, in terms of the criteria, they are able to get into additional support of about 480 rands for granting aid. So we are able to also provide that support. But indeed, it's not enough. I think when you look at the full basket of services provided by government, it is also important to highlight that the older persons are able to get onto the indigent list within their municipalities, and then they would be exempt from paying rates, water and light, etc. So when those instances arise and we come across those, we do encourage and even in some cases assist the older persons with the municipalities to ensure that they get onto the indigent list. And that's an important aspect that I think a lot of people are still not aware of this support mechanisms when you look at the overall basket of services provided by government. Lastly, Honourable Chair, I also want to agree with members in terms of the concerns raised in terms of whether it be abuse of older persons, whether it be the manner in which society treats older persons. These are important aspects. I think that what we need to do, and this is the last comment I will make, I think we really need to enforce the issue of value systems and values, the values of Ubuntu, the values of social cohesion, respect, care, and protection, etc., which are important values that are taught primarily in the households, in the family units, and of course, yes, they are taught in schools, in communities, in churches, and so on and so forth. But I think this is an important aspect that must stem from the family unit onwards. Once we start teaching people and we embed these values at a very young age, we are likely to have a society that is much more tuned to I suppose appreciation of older persons in this regard. And of course, it's very important to highlight that these are things that can't be legislated. Issues of values can't exactly be legislated, but must be embedded in the fabric of society. And we need to do much more as a country to embed these values and these morals into society, so we don't have the challenges that we face at the moment, whether it be through fraud and corruption, whether it be through guilt treatment and abuse of older persons. I think that we have to move much swifter towards embedding these values and creating a kind of society or fabric of society that is welcoming, that is amenable to all sectors of society, by the way, to all persons. But I think this aspect of respect and social cohesion and indeed the values of Ubuntu are important that we must embed. And we must also continue to reinforce the importance of these values as kids grow up and become older and much maturer. So, Chair, let me leave it at that. And thank you very much for the inputs we've taken on board and taken note of all the comments that have been raised by members. And we're going to go back and obviously embed some of these aspects and give you some responses from some of our conversations we've had with various sectors of society. As Sybil indicated, we've spoken to traditional leaders, we've spoken to older persons forums, etc., and so on and so forth. So this is a process of embellishing and I suppose improving some of these aspects, and we really appreciate the inputs coming from members. Chair, let me leave it at that, Honourable Chair, and thank you once again, and the honourable members for the inputs and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Gigi. I think you have tried to answer some of our questions, which I know for a fact that you can't be really getting into our satisfaction out of what we know, that what is happening outside in our communities, which is not nice and which is very bad. especially to those elderly that are affected by this disease of Alzheimer's and all the staff, those that are vulnerable to our communities. But thanks ever so much for that explanation. I can see that there are no hands for now, which means that at least much as you haven't satisfied ourselves, but we'll keep on asking questions when circumstances and situations are coming up and confront us as politicians that are encountering these challenges. Thanks ever so much. Then, Lindy, what is the next item?
Chair, there was only one item for today's proceedings.
Okay. Then if it's the case, let me thank everyone.
Chairperson, it's the minister here, sorry.
I was hoping between the minister and
Okay, Honorable Minister.
Yes. No, I'm not going to spend a lot of time, Chairperson, because I know everybody has to go get ready for going. I wish to thank the Portfolio Committee and even for the questions and indicate to the members that if we really have to address the issues that are facing the elderly, one way or the other, we need to work together. We need to unite in some things. Yes, it's a question of holding government accountable and so, but it is also about holding each other's hand to help this situation. Thank you very much.
Yes, we are done. I think we will have a management.
I wonder who's speaking whilst the minister is speaking. Thank you very much, Minister. We also appreciate the presentation and hope that at least there will be improvement out of this amendment bill. There will be an improvement of the elderly people, and it was just on the right time whilst we were about to close the elderly month. So we were on point in terms of dealing with it. Do we have to, or what is the process, Lindy?
Chairperson?
What is the process? Do we have to adopt?
Chair, the process now, that's the initial stage of the considered legislation, is just to get a briefing from the department. And after the briefing, the committee we will decide, we'll have a program and then decide whether we want to have public hearings, and then we go to the MOD and then the formal stage. I think for now is the briefing, and then we need to apply our mind. Maybe you can assist with assessment in another meeting just to provide guidance to the committee now that there are critical issues that have been raised by this piece of legislation. And then a committee can take a decision, and then we can advertise and see and draft our program, take cognizance that we've got the Children Amendment Bill that is before us as well. So for now, we are done. That's the first stage, to listen to what the bill contains. And then thereafter, we'll have our program as the committee, because the bill is before us now. It's our baby. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Lindy, for outlining the process. Definitely we'll have to have the public hearings on this, as even the department is saying that we have to make the elderly people aware. So the awareness campaign is needed, but let's allow your program and your schedule. You look at it and you tell us what is it that we are supposed to happen. We are supposed to make it for now out of the bill. The department has presented it, and we have had an agreement and understand some of other things that were not clear to us. Thanks ever so much. If it's the case, let's leave the message for now and adjourn the meeting. The meeting has adjourned, Honorable Member. Thanks everyone Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Deputy Minister in absentia. Thank officials, advocate, everyone. Thank you ever so much. Meeting has adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.